Silvera. Adam, thank you so much for joining us today. Hi.
Thank you so much for having me. I wish this was in person, but we will make do and have fun today.
And hopefully we'll actually get to see you in Romania very soon.
Yes, fingers crossed.
I don't think Adam Silvera needs much introduction, right? But I'll just remind you of some of the awesome books that he's written, right? So I'm sure that a lot of you know him for his novels. He started with More Happy Than Not, but then you might also know him from novels such as History Is All You Left Me and They Both Die at the End, which genuinely created a mini revolution in this country. So everyone read it, I think, and that was so fantastic. Guys, remember that They Both Die at the End can be found at Stoica publishers, right? So for anyone who hasn't read it yet, if there's anyone out there who hasn't read it yet, Amândoi mor la sfârșit, Stoica books, right? A fantastic novel. And we also get to know Adam from other novels too, such as the Infinity series, and maybe we'll talk about that as well.
Yeah.
And there's something in the works right now, but again, we'll let Adam tell us all about that.
Cool.
I know that everyone has questions for you, but I also want to get my chance at the questions.
Yeah.
Give the floor to everyone else. So you've written all of these fantastic books that we get to enjoy quite a lot. But what was your story as an author? So how did you end up from being born, right, to being here, the author that we all love so much?
Well, first of all, thank you all again for having me. This is already so lovely. The energy and vibe is great. Thank you, Irina, for hosting and for translating my work and making it more available. So thank you. So I've been writing since I was 11 years old, and I've been writing for 20 years now, essentially. And I always had like big story ideas, and I was always so eager to write, and I would write fan fiction, which was, I always tell writers, is such a great start for getting into writing, because you don't have to do all the world building. You don't have to come up with new characters if you don't want to. All the characters that you know and love already exist. You're just putting them in different situations. But then as I got older, I started wanting to develop my own stories. And for me, every book starts off with a what if question, which is very similar to fan fiction, right? You're like, what if these two boys got together instead of like this boy-girl pairing, right? Like, and then you explore that. Like, what if this person loses the tournament? What if, Katniss wasn't in the Hunger Games, right? Like, whatever that question is, like, what if Prim was in the Hunger Games? Like, that's a whole different book. That's a whole different story. So I would ask myself these what if questions, and that's how I arrived at each of my books. For They Both Die at the End, for example, was, what if you could find out the day you're about to die, that you can't change it. You don't know how it's going to happen. You just know that today is the day. What does that look like? And then the whole book came to me from there.
Right. Nice. Do you remember what your first fanfic was?
Yeah, I mean, so I did, for TV shows, I did Charmed and Supernatural. For books, I did Harry Potter. And, I obviously have to mention, I do not support any of J.K. Rowling's transphobic nonsense. She's really disappointing as a creator and a human right now. Writing Harry Potter was so true to my history that I'm just, to answer the question, that's the only reason I bring it up. But yeah, I was always really into fantasy and magic, which is why I have like my Infinity series as well. But yeah, those were the stories in which I operated.
Nice. All right. Okay, let's get to the good questions as well, right? So we have so many questions from your readers here. And Anna and Esu, let's start with you.
Yeah, first of all, hello. I am a huge fan and I absolutely love you. I've been following you for years. And really
Yay, thank you.
I absolutely adore you. And second of all, I heard of something in the works with They Both Die at the End, a show, if I'm correct?
Yeah. So
what did you reveal about the show?
Yeah, so I'm working on the TV show right now with Chris Van Dusen, who created Bridgerton, the TV show. So he's already very clearly successful at adapting books into TV shows. So we are creating the show together. We're co-writing the first episode together, and it's really exciting. They Both Die at the End has always been my favorite of my stories and the story that I always wanted to see turn into a TV show. So I'm really happy that I get to be part of the creation of it. And Chris has been so wonderful, and Chris has had such a really valuable outsider perspective that's helping make the world of They Both Die at the End and Death Cast feel so much bigger. So yeah, I'm really, we don't have a cast yet. We don't have all that stuff, but like we're working on things, and just cross your fingers for us, because it's about to be a really busy month for us.
Cool, can't wait to see it, and best of luck.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Then we have Scar.
I'm living one of the best day of my life meeting you. I'm a fan of History is All You Left Me. I think the first book that I read from you, and I remember when I searched it on Google because I wanted in more version than the English. I found the deluxe edition and I cried. Like,
oh yay!
I cried. I start to wrote a novel. It's called Rotterdam, and I wish you will be one of the first person that is gonna to read this, because it's inspired by Matt. Sorry, this is my character about Griffin and Theo, and about their story. And it's about two boys that fell in love. And I want an advice here. I want them to be a relationship, but I want some spice there. Should I make them broke up in the time of it? Because I want something different.
So you want like a conflict?
Yes, because
yeah. So first of all, Scar, thank you for all your lovely words and enthusiasm and support for History Is All You Left Me. Like that feels like my secret book sometimes. It has like a smaller following. It's definitely not They Both Die at the End, but I love it so much. So thank you so much for finding it. And yeah, there are a lot of ways to show conflict within a story. I think, without knowing too much about what your book is, I think ask yourself, what do each of those boys want out of life, right? And if they have opposing worldviews, don't be scared of that. Like if they just think about things differently, embrace it. Like if it makes you uncomfortable to put them in that situation, it's probably going to be really interesting for us as readers. Like there are times that when I was writing What If It's Us with Becky, we were like, oh, we don't want the characters to be mad at each other. And it's like, that leads to an interesting read for the reader, So embrace something that feels uncomfortable in the book and in the story, and just see where it takes you. And don't forget that it's just a draft. If it doesn't work, if it doesn't feel interesting or exciting enough for you, you can explore a different route later.
Thank you so much. I love you so much. I can say you saved my life. And I can wait to show you my book and my work.
I'm so excited for your work to be out there. That's I seriously, it's such an honor to hear from writers who have connected with my work and then wanted to go pursue their own writing. I have many literary heroes as well, where I was able to thank them for inspiring me. So I'm very honored that I got to inspire you as well. And I'm looking forward to see who you inspire next.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you, Scar.
I'd like to follow up on that. And you know how you gave Scar advice. Do you remember a piece of advice that you received from an author, be it hero or a friend?
You know, I think that the biggest piece of advice that I encourage all writers to remember in general is that what works for one writer won't mean it necessarily works for you in your process, right? Like every book I've written has been written differently. You know, They Both Die at the End, I outlined the entire book from start to finish before I wrote a single page. And for More Happy Than Not, my first novel, while I was writing chapter 1, I was outlining chapters 2 and 3. And then while I was writing 2 and 3, I was outlining 3 and 4. So I didn't know the full story. I was just going a step at a time, essentially. But that doesn't mean that like what worked for one book won't necessarily work for the other. So as you listen to writers tell you about their process, just remember that that's what worked for them. If it doesn't work for you, that doesn't make you a bad writer. That just means that that method isn't appropriate for the book that you are writing, and you'll just have to figure something else out.
Nice, awesome, thank you. All right, back to your lovely readership. Maria, what's your question?
Hi, so I am a very big fan. I have read They Both Die at the End very fast, especially the last 2 parts. And my question for you is, how did you come up with the idea? Like, as you've said earlier, the first thought was, what if you knew you were going to die? But like, how did that sudden thought just come to your mind?
Yeah. So thank you, Maria. It's really, because I remember specifically where I was, what I was doing for They Both Die at the End in ways that I don't necessarily remember for like every other book. But so I was holding my newborn goddaughter in Ohio, and I was sitting on the floor with her. And then I just, we were on this military base, and there was something I felt kind of like dangerous about that. And I remember just being scared about death and thinking like, what if we're all about to die and we have no idea? Like, and then I was like, well, what if like something existed that could tell us that we're about to die? And then that's where it started spilling. And then literally the title came to me. It was just like, They Both Die at the End. Like, and that the title has never come first for me necessarily. And also normally I start off with the character first. This time it was the world that came to me first. So it was They Both Die at the End. Then I was like, the organization would be called Deathcast. And then it all just started going from there. And then I was originally going to write the story about a straight boy and straight girl, because this was in 2012. We weren't having as much as putting as many efforts into diversity yet, and showcasing those books and supporting those authors and those stories. And I knew that I had a really incredible high concept idea. But what happened was I couldn't think of a name for the girl. And I had 2 names for the boy that I really liked. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to just make it about 2 boys, because that's what's true to me. And I also don't know a name for this girl. And picking a name for a character is very important for me. If I don't have it right, I can't proceed. And Mateo's name was actually originally Wyatt. And then that changed for me. He no longer felt like a Wyatt by the end of the draft. But Rufus was always Rufus. But that's how They Both Die at the End came to be. And then I just outlined it for about a year, and in this like notebook that I had, and then I started writing. I wrote it in 2 months, because I love that world and those characters so much.
I don't know if the beginning of the story is sweet or scary, but that is an amazing story.
It's sweet and scary. We all lived, so that's great. And we didn't die that day. But I remember like holding my goddaughter and then being so inspired that I gave her back to like one of the grandparents. I was like, oh, here, take her. And I had my laptop on the floor and I just started typing. It really just took over me that way.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you, Maria. Simina, how about you? What's your question?
Hello to everyone.
Hi.
And hello, Adam. Nice to meet you.
You as well.
I was wondering, because we're in a young adult festival, when you write, do you have your public in mind? Do you have specific references, thinking your public is young adult? Do you guide yourself to some points in when you develop the plot or the language or stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, language is definitely really important because words that were trendy when I was a teenager have gone completely extinct today. And I was a teenager like 11 years ago, you know, but it, you know, I think the older I'm getting, the harder it is to feel more connected to what teens are involved in. You know, I think that's one of the benefits of being on social media, though, is that I see what teens are really excited about and what they're watching. And then if I'm watching those things, I'm able to make those references. But, you know, I'm probably not going to write a book about TikTok dances, you know, like that's not in my wheelhouse. That's not something I'm doing, you know, but I know now that instead of saying like, oh, the teens on Facebook, I'm going to say the teens on TikTok if I'm writing a book in 2022, right? So it's understanding those references. That's why it was kind of fun writing the prequel to They Both Die at the End, because it takes place in 2010 where I had just turned 20. So all my teen experiences that were so relevant to me, I actually got to put into that book, like what my interests were, what pop culture references I was using. But yeah, I mean, and then, you know, I have teenagers in my life, in my family, from like younger cousins to family friends, who kind of help me keep an understanding of what teens are into today. But you know, I just never try too hard, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I don't ever want to look like I'm trying to sound too much like today's teen. It feels cringy to me to use a lot of verbiage that I wouldn't normally use.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And following up on that, we got a question earlier for you, and somebody, speaking of what teenagers do, right? Somebody was curious if you watched Heartstopper, because
I haven't yet. I've heard really wonderful things, and I will definitely check it out in the near future. But I've not had the chance. I'm busy building my own TV show right now, and keeping up with my deadlines so I can get this book to all of you in the fall. But I'm sure that once everything's turned in, I'm gonna just kick back and I will watch everything in one go. Like that's the kind of viewer I am. But I'm more than anything, whether or not I get to watch it soon, I'm just happy that Heartstopper exists for you know, a lot of teenagers who see the teenagers who see themselves in it. I think that's a really special thing.
Yep, fair enough. And that's literally the best reason for not having watched it yet. So
yeah, there's a lot to read, a lot to watch, a lot to do. And I need to be better about making sure that I am prioritizing my stories, because I also, you know, for everything that Heartstopper offers, there are characters that exist in my books that aren't represented in that show, right? And no single show or book can capture every experience. That's an impossible task. But for me, it's really important to try to get more queer Latinos on TV. And so that's where my work is right now.
fair enough. Thanks. Larissa,
Thanks.
How about your question?
Okay, now you can hear me, right?
Yes. Hi.
Okay. First of all, thank you for representing the LGBTQ community, because it is actually a really big deal. I think your book was the first one that I read about the LGBTQ community, and actually the second one was "What If It's Us," and then the other one. But I have a couple of questions, if it's okay. Okay, so did you even once think that during writing the book that you have to change the plot to somehow save both Rufus and Matteo from death? Because like maybe they could be an exception or something. While I was reading it, I felt maybe they would be, I don't know, just to not be dead at the end of the book.
Yeah, so here's the thing. I never thought about that because for me, that was never the point, you know. I think that we all die, right? Like, and it's hard and it's sad. And for me, I have such anxiety about dying suddenly and without warning. Like, my anxiety is what created Death Pass, basically. People ask me all the time, if Death Pass existed, would you sign up for it? I'm like, yes, this is why I wrote the book. Like, I want this service. I'm bummed that we don't have it. But it's, you know, but I also think that for how much everyone loves Matteo and Rufus, if they had lived, we wouldn't feel the way that we feel today about this book, because we'd be like, it'd be a little bit just like relief and some celebration, but you wouldn't be haunted by them necessarily. And I just wanted to tell that story where it's like to you know, for me, they won, you know. I think they had such a great, they were so triumphant on their end day. They did so much, and they got to experience so much. And I really stand by that quote where it's better to have lived one day right instead of a lifetime of wrongs, you know? And I'm, you know, I think it would have been sadder if Matteo and Rufus didn't have such a successful end day, right? But they got to meet each other, experience new things, fall in love, and then the sadness happens. But yeah, I never thought about wanting them to survive. I also think that would have been a big betrayal of the title. Like, I think, like, there's a book, an adult novel called John Dies at the End, and guess what? John does not die at the end, you know? And it's like, and I'm just like, okay, then it's, all you did was hook people in, but you didn't honor it, you know? So yeah. What was your second question?
You said that you would sign up on DevCast if you would be able to. And yeah. I have a question. If you'd be able to receive a message from DevCast announcing your death, would you sign up to end day to find a friend on your last day on Earth, or how would you spend it?
Oh yeah, like if I would sign up for a last friend. So if let's say I got the call today in Los Angeles, where I am right now, I would spend time with my dog. I'd go get my dog from daycare. I'd make sure that he has a new home, that someone who's gonna take him in, who's gonna love him and protect him. I'd spend time talking to my best friends and my mom. But I think if I was like in another country where I didn't know a bunch of people, I would probably sign up for like the Last Friend app and then meet someone. But I'm lucky that I have a lot of people in Los Angeles who I love, that I would want to spend time with, that I don't need to meet a stranger necessarily. You know, I might change my mind for like, if I'm still around in the evening, right? Because I don't want my friends to witness my death, much like Rufus didn't. So something to figure out when the day arrives.
Thank you so much for answering.
Thank you so much, Larissa. Appreciate it. All
right, Alina, how about you? What's your question?
Hi, Adam.
Hi, Irina.
So I'm such a big fan of They Both Die at the End. This was the first book about LGBTQ community. And I want to congratulate you about this book. And I have a question about it. Okay.
Yeah.
Did the book have another end before it was published? And I'm asking you this because the way Matteo died, it's kind of surprising for me. I was expecting something more surprising.
Yeah, so it didn't have a different ending. How Matteo and Rufus died was how I had always outlined them to die. Like that's always how it was. And with Matteo's death, so the way that like I get people to, you know, to view the deaths is that Matteo, you know, there's like hints very early on in the book in the first few chapters about like the oven, like and the stove, like not really working, which is gutting. But if Matteo had not gone on the last friend app and discovered Rufus, Matteo would have died probably significantly sooner, like probably like a couple hours into his end day, you know? And then for all the times that Matteo kind of stopped Rufus from walking into the street without really paying attention to the cars, Rufus would have died hours before as well. So because Matteo and Rufus met each other, that's why they lived as long as they did. And that's why Rufus dies at the end, because he doesn't have Matteo there to save him. And you know, Matteo dies at home, the place that he always thought was going to keep him safe. So that was sort of the message behind that, where it's like Matteo hid from the world for the better part of his life, and he stayed at home thinking that nothing bad can happen to me here. And something bad happened to him there. So that's why Matteo dies at home. But yeah, that's always how it was.
Okay, I have another question, if that's okay. Was it easy for you to choose the right name for the main characters?
What was that? One more time.
Was it easy for you to choose the right name for the main characters?
Well, for Rufus, it was easy because I had a friend growing up. His name was Rufus. And then he was the only human I'd ever met named Rufus. Every other Rufus was a dog. So I literally was like, I'm going to reclaim Rufus for humans. And that's literally like how I decided on Rufus's name. And then also, you know, I look at who are the other popular characters in young adult, right? Like, I'm not going to name a character Harry, right? Because everyone's going to be thinking about Harry Potter. I'm not going to name a character Katniss. Like, I'm not going to, you know, or Augustus, because of Augustus Waters in The Fault in Our Stars, or Hazel. Like, if a name already feels too popular within the YA space, I tend to stay away from it for my main characters, because when I see people say Matteo or Rufus online right now, 9 times out of 10, they are talking about my characters, right? So I try to make sure that I'm finding names that feel distinct, and also names that are like real. It's not like I'm making up, like no one else is ever gonna write a book about a character named Katniss. Like, that's, you know, like she named that character after a plant, like, and now anyone else who does that, no editor would let that happen because it's just too distracting. But Matteo, it actually came from this kid in high school who I did not like. So for me, that was my power play, where I was like, you know what? I don't like you. And now I'm going to give your name to the most likable character I've ever created. And that's how Matteo got his name. And it's one of my favorite names. But yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Irina.
I want to follow up on that with another question. So they both died at the end at so many book clubs already. And this idea of likability was always a thing, right? Who do you like more? And my question is, if you were to hang out with either Rufus or Matteo, which one would you choose if you had to?
I mean, so I have such a soft spot for Matteo. Matteo, when I was writing him, I described him as the person I'd like to be, you know, like someone who's just so pure-hearted, you know, but as a result, a little sheltered. And so I really feel like I want to, like, you know, wrap him up a bit. But on the other end, Rufus, who Rufus is, that's more like who I was as a teenager. You know, I had anger issues. I didn't always understand that. I had like that. I had just had like a temper, and I would have outbursts and stuff, and I would make mistakes as a result. And that's why I loved writing Rufus, because when we meet him at the beginning of the book, he's making a mistake, and but you know, he's still grieving his family who he lost like earlier that year, and he's developing new tools. But just because he makes a mistake doesn't mean that he should be defined by it. So yeah, I mean, on different days, I have like a clear answer on if I want to hang out with Mateo or Rufus. I feel like today my chest says I want to hang out with Rufus, and just kind of like, you know, coach him a little bit in the same way that he got to like coach Mateo.
Fair enough. Cool. Andrei, how about your question? Andrei Roshka.
All right, so I have like two questions. The first one is actually related to They Both Die in the End. I read it, it's really good. A friend of mine recommended it. It's
Thank you.
Fantastic. And I actually have a pretty interesting question. Do you think that Deathcast actually helped to boost this sort of mortality? Like, there will be more calls because people would get into more risky situations because they know they will die in that day.
Yeah, so that's something that I explore a bit in the prequel and explore a little bit in the TV show, because, you know, and also in They Both Die at the End as well, right? Like, we see that guy who sets off the bomb at the gym because he's like, well, I'm dying anyway, so I don't care. And I think that there's a lot of people who do stuff like that, right? Who just think without consequences because they understand that they're about to die anyway. But I don't ever want to, like, in my head, I don't ever blame Deathcast for, like, I don't think that they're creating more death necessarily. I think in some cases, yes. And we experience this with any new addition to society, right? Because we could say that the person who created the car created more deaths, right? We could say the person who created the airplane created more deaths, the person who created guns, right? Like, these are all true, you know? But I bet you today that despite all the fatalities that we see because of cars, we still wouldn't get rid of every car because cars still serve such a unique, specific function for us. And I think the same of Deathcast, where they are providing a service that a lot of us deeply need to make sure that we don't die without saying what we need to do, get our affairs in order. But yeah, so I mean, I think it's a two-sided coin for sure. But I don't think that, like, the death rates have spiked exponentially because of Deathcast. I think that there's probably like highs and lows.
Thank you very much for that question. And the next one is actually about a series of books, the What If It's Us, that you wrote with Becky. I actually wonder how you two actually got to meet each other and decide, let's like write a book together.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, I wrote the What If It's Us duology, What If It's Us and Here's to Us, with Becky Albertalli, who's best known for Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda, which became the movie Love, Victor. And we met because we had the same agent at one point, and he sold More Happy Than Not, my first novel, and Simon in the same week. And they were both young adult novels about gay boys. So we read each other's manuscripts and loved each other's work so much. And we just kept exchanging emails back and forth. And then a couple months later, we were thinking like, oh, it'd be really fun to write our own like YA rom-com one day. And we just kind of started talking about who those boys were and what that plot was. And then Becky had told me a story about like someone that she'd seen one time who she thought was cute and she wanted to find him. And I was like, oh, I think that would be like a really cool story if we did it like YA with like two boys. And then we did that. And yeah, that's how that came about, like really. And we hadn't even met in person or talked on the phone before we decided to write a book together. It was just all over email.
Thank you so much.
Cool, thank you.
Nice. Antonia, how about your question?
Hello, first of all, I'm Antonia. And second of all, I am so happy to meet you and nice to meet you.
Thank you. You too, Antonia.
I wanna know where from do you have inspiration for so many books, one after another, and also I wanna say that I really love the Bodarian that Here's to Us. The books were just amazing.
Thank you so much, Antonia. Seriously, like, I'm so happy that you loved Here's to Us as well. Like, we had such a fun time writing that one. And they both, and obviously they both typed it as well. Thank you. So the inspiration for all my books, again, it kind of like comes back to just existing in the world, right? And just experiencing something and asking yourself, what if this happened? Like, you know, I've given you the examples for They Both Die at the End. Like, for me, it, like, let's say like History Is All You Left Me. You know, I had a boyfriend who I broke up with because it was long distance, and I still loved him, but it just wasn't working because we were so far apart that I just started thinking, I was like, you know, I'll get back together with him eventually. But then he started dating someone. I was like, it's fine, we'll get back together. And then he almost drowned. And he calls me on the phone and tells me that. And it was so scary because I was like so confident that we were going to get back together one day. And then I just asked myself, what if he had died? You know, how would that have impacted me today? And then History Is All You Left Me, the book, kind of came from that question, right? It took a fear of mine and it made it real in fiction. And I got to explore what that could have looked like. So I think in some ways, a lot of my books have been therapy for me before I actually got a therapist. And it helped me just sort of navigate a lot of the problems that I was having in my life, or, you know, difficult situations. So really, I get my inspiration from just being alive and living my life. And some relationships work out, some don't. Some dreams come true, others don't. But I'm always able to find the story in all those situations.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Antonia.
Sophia, you're next.
Okay, so I wanted to say that I really loved your books, especially They Both Die at the End. It was the first queer book that I actually read and the first book that I wanted to read. Also, I wanted to ask you about writing, more about how to make better world building, because I want to write a story. I've been thinking of a story for some time and I don't know how to make better world building. And the second question would be, how did you get someone to publish your book? Because I've been trying to search and do some research, but I couldn't really find a lot of things about it.
Cool. Okay, I'm going to answer world building first, then publishing. So for world building, I mean, it depends on like what kind of story you're doing, right? Like it depends on if you're doing fantasy novel, if you're doing something that's slightly science fiction, like They Both Die at the End, or More Happy Than Not. If you're even doing world building in a contemporary novel, right? Like contemporary novels have world building too, between like pop culture references, different activities, and you know, like, I mean, so you have to just you have to look at the scope of what you're doing. Like, can I mind me asking you what genre you're writing in, just so I can best assist you? Like, are you writing fantasy? Are you writing contemporary? Is it science fiction?
I think it would be contemporary, sort of like the action I want it to be in 2050 Japan, but it's not utopian Japan. It would be like today, sort of. It would be sort of contemporary if I think about it.
And you said it was in 2015 specifically? 2050. Like 2050. Okay, cool. So, all right. So, I mean, so for that, when you're jump starting something that feels, because this is what we would call a near future novel, where it's like, it's not like centuries and centuries away. We will definitely come across it in our lifetime, in near future. So for that, you do a lot of research on what Japan is like today, what Japan was like decades before, and you just really start tracking the evolution in all their developments, right? And how they've advanced, and just, you know, you're going to find yourself you need to ask a lot of questions and have a lot of answers for things that will probably never make their way into the novel itself, right? But that you yourself will know how this politician arrived to build this law that allowed for this thing to happen, or the creator who built this service that now has like launched this whole new organization or whatever, right? And depending on like how, you know, like let's say you start wanting to write flying cars, which is something we've all been talking about for decades, and we still don't have them, right? Let's say you're finally writing the flying car, right? You need to understand who that engineer is and what resources they have that allow them to do that. And so really it's just asking yourself a lot of questions. Like when I was writing my fantasy series, The Infinity Cycle, you know, with Infinity Sun, it's set in a world that's just like ours, except people with magic have always existed. And there's magical creatures like phoenixes. But I had to ask myself, how does magic interact with social media? You know, and I'm just like, oh, I bet there would be a lot of, look at the way that people profile themselves on social media today. Imagine if you had an Instagram account, but you could also create fire. You're gonna be doing really cool stuff on your Instagram that like I can't do. So that's a lot of that stuff is like in my fantasy series as well, because it's intersecting with the world that we're in. So I would just say, as you're doing your research into Japan and how Japan came to be and how they arrived to where they are today, just ask yourself what changes have to happen to get to the point in where your story starts. But yeah, it's just a lot of like research and imagination, truly, and across all genres. And then for your other question about how to break into publishing. So, I mean, I did it the traditional way where I wrote my novel. I reached out to several agents with a query letter, and then selected the agent that I thought was best for me at the time. And then the agent is the one who will submit your novel to publishers for you, right? Because like they're the ones that have all the connections and the relationships and know that, oh, this editor is looking for a near future novel set in Japan. And it's like, cool, well, I know that that's exactly what you've written. So I'm gonna send your book to that editor, and then hopefully they like it and then they buy it, and then you begin your process together. But it's a lot of, it feels like matchmaking in some ways, where you just wanna find the best partner for yourself. But yeah, that's the traditional publishing path that I took. I can't really speak to like self-publishing or more independent publishing, but like that's what I went through.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Maria, how about your question?
Okay, so first of all, I would like to say that I'm such a big fan of the both at the end. It's the only book I've read written by you, but I'm sure there will be many more. And I cannot wait. I just wanted to ask you 2 questions. First of all, I know that when we were reading the book, we all knew how it was going to end, obviously. But I am sure that everyone had their own version of them dying. Like I personally thought that they were going to die together or something like that. So how did you think about the most important moment of the book, like them dying?
Yeah. So it's funny. I didn't want to, for how successful their end day was, and I do view it as a success. I didn't want to give them every win possible. And you know, they're like, maybe we'll die in our sleep, and I'm like, that's lovely. That's your 18 and 17, you're not going to die in your sleep. Like that's like, you know, that's for older, people. But I was hanging out with my first boyfriend, and the whole thing that Mateo does with Rufus, with like the arm and making sure he doesn't cross the street, like that's what I used to do with my ex-boyfriend. And he was actually the one that was like, what if that was part of the book. And I was like, oh, that's genius. And then we were talking more and more, and then he was like, well, yeah, and then what if Mateo dies at home, the place that he always thought was safe? So it was really just through like a conversation with my ex-boyfriend that helped me get there. And it felt right, you know, like I didn't, like having them die together would have been lovely and would have been beautiful. I don't know what that would have looked like. I've never stopped to really think about, because again, like once I had it in my head how they died, like that's just what it was. Because the whole point of it is that their deaths were always going to be sudden, and unexpected, because they're both healthy boys who didn't have like any prior medical conditions to be aware of. And, you know, that's why writing the prequel, The First Die at the End, was so different, because one of the main characters, Orion, he has a heart condition that he's had for years, right? So he's been constantly expecting Deathcast to call him, or it's the first day of the service and he's just like, I'm sure I'm going to be amongst the first to die, because it just, I've been kind of waiting for this day my entire life, you know. But so he has a lot more death anxiety than some other characters, and more reasons to believe that he would actually die young. And then also, if he gets the call, like he can probably assume that it's gonna be a heart attack, but that's not necessarily true. It can be something else, you know. But yeah, it just that's how I got to the deaths. And once I kind of get it in my head, as a writer, I really do my best to try to stick to it in this world, just because if it feels surprising to you, then it's surprising to the characters.
Thank you very much. And my second question would be that when you were writing They Both Die at the End, were you expecting it to become such an international bestseller? Like, how did you think of that? Then how do you feel now that it's like that?
No, not at all. I mean, like, I always, like, again, as I said earlier, I definitely recognize the potential for it to be very popular. Like, I think the world of Deathcast is very interesting. I think there's a really cool hook to it. We can all kind of like relate to it and debate about the ethics of it. But, you know, at some point or another, we have all wondered when we are going to die. So I think that that's what makes this book feel so universal and global. But I never thought it would become what it has become. And I'm very grateful. And I'm also just proud of myself for sticking to my guns and writing this book about queer Latinos instead of a straight white couple, just because I thought that would have sold better, you know, because I would have felt very conflicted about the success of the book today if all my other books are about queer characters and mainly queer characters of color. And then my one book that goes kind of like explodes with the readership was about white people. I would feel very weird about that, and probably sad, honestly. So I'm glad that the story that feels true to me is a story that has resonated with everybody. I'm so grateful to Book Talk for, you know, for all the word of mouth and all the people cosplaying as Mateo, all the crying reaction videos. Yeah, it's been really wonderful and mind blowing.
Thank you very much. It was such an honor to meet you.
You as well. Thank you so much.
All right, Ariana, you're next. But while you're asking your question, just as a kind reminder, we only have about 20 minutes left. So maybe keep it to one per person so that we can get to everyone who has a question, right? So Ariana, what's yours?
So first of all, I want to say that it's such an honor to meet you, Adam. I'm so happy and I'm so nervous right now. I don't know if you can feel it. I was wondering...
Oh, you're doing fine. It's lovely to meet you as well. All good.
Thank you. My question is, what advice would you give to a young aspiring writer?
To tell your story, much like I just spoke to about They Both Die at the End, and it feels in many ways, I was like, only I could have written this book, you know? And I always encourage writers to write the story that only they can tell, you know? And I think other writers could have written about Deathcast, right? But who these characters are and their respective hearts, like only I could have done that because Mateo and Rufus are both a part of me, you know? So anyone else, we could have told them, write a story about a boy named Mateo and Rufus, and it's set in a world called Deathcast, and here's what happens. I bet you anything that would be a completely different book, right? And so really just like tell a story that feels so true to you. And even if that doesn't mean it needs to be a memoir. It doesn't mean that it needs to reveal all your personal details. In the same way that in History Is All You Left Me, I was able to write about a boy who lost his first love without having done that myself. You know, my ex-boyfriend didn't die, right? But in some ways I lost him when we broke up. So I was able to dial up those feelings, you know? So I think that just do something that feels true, and people are going to have the reactions to your work in the same way that everyone's kind of speaking to how they have like reacted to my books today, because all my books are honest, because they all come from me. So I just encourage you to tell like your most authentic story.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck.
Right, Alexia, you're next.
Hi, I'm very excited to meet you. My question is, after you wrote The Both Die at the End, you ever think that you're going to write this book that is going to come out, The First to Die at the End, or any other book in this universe?
I wanted to. I actually wanted 2 years ago, but I think that the conversations I had with my editor at the time were very much like, if we rush into another story about Deathcast, does that kind of dilute or make this story feel less special? And I was grateful for that, because it allowed me to like preserve Mateo and Rufus for a while. But I never thought I was going to write a prequel. Like I had different ideas that I was excited about, like I was outlining already as well, that maybe I'll revisit down the line, but depending on how the new books do. But I never once was planning on writing a prequel that was set on the first day of Deathcast. And it just kind of randomly came to me. I was talking to my publisher about new ideas. I had a different book that I pitched first that I really wanted to write. And I will write it. There's going to be 3 Deathcast books right now. So the prequel comes out this fall, but literally I had a whole outline for like the book that I was excited to write. And then I had like one paragraph for like the prequel. And I was like, yeah, it'll follow 2 people who meet on the first day of Deathcast. And, one gets the call and the other one doesn't. And everyone, my agent, my editor, the publisher, the sales team, they were all like, can we get that book first? And I was just like, no, I wanted to write the other book. I was so excited. Like I didn't, again, as you've all heard me talk about, I didn't have names for these characters in the prequel. Like I didn't know who they were. I knew who the other characters were. But I'm so grateful that I wrote the prequel first, because we're timing it with the 5-year anniversary of They Both Die at the End, but also because, you know, I get to include certain cameos for certain characters who we know from They Both Die at the End. And then also I get to introduce you to the main characters of the 3rd book. So the main characters of the 3rd book are in the prequel as well. So that's really fun. It connects all the books now, like in a bigger way. But yeah, I honestly, I would happily write 10 Deathcast novels if given the chance, because there are just so many interesting storylines in this world that I don't think 3 books is going to be enough. So please continue to support these novels so I can write all of them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're really hoping you will write 10 of them.
Yeah, I'd love to, seriously.
And guys, just so you know, so the first one to die at the end will be translated into Romanian as well. So it will probably be launched sometime in the beginning of 2023, right? So we have the English version in the autumn, but then we have the Romanian version a couple of months after that. So, you know, we can also be excited for that as well.
Also, just so you guys know, the book is longer than They Both Die at the End. They Both Die at the End, for some perspective, the page count varies across territories and countries, but They Both Die at the End is 73,000 words. The First to Die at the End is 106,000 words.
Wow.
So it is bigger. So it'll be worth the wait.
That's wonderful. That's great. All right, back to your lovely readers. Yana, what's your question?
Hi, Adam. It's really nice to meet you.
You too, Yana.
I love your book, They Both Die at the End. It's the first book I read this year. I think that we all had that hope that Matteo and Rufus will leave till the end of the book. They were really close. And all I can think about is what would have happened to them if Matteo would, I don't know, check the hour or just stay in their room.
Yeah, you know, I think that, so here's the thing. Matteo and Rufus have lived in this world where Death Cast existed for 7 years, right? They've grown up with it. And they understand that they're not going to beat the odds. Like, there have been no stories in the past 7 years about people who got their call and survived, you know? And so, I mean, I think that they had accepted their fate in a lot of ways. And you know, the problem is Matteo has such a big heart, and he wanted to introduce Rufus to his dad, you know, like that was something that was going to feel really special to him. And so he gets out of bed and he like makes the tea and, you know, but I think that they just had accepted that they weren't going to beat the system, essentially. And I think it's so interesting because a lot of people went into the book thinking that that's what the book was going to be. It's like, how do we beat it? I'm like, no, I think it's realistic that they just don't challenge it. Like, that's why that, you know, I get questions a lot about how does Deathcast work? Why aren't they thinking about it? I'm like, because they're 18 years old. And I'm like, if I asked all of you right now how airplanes work, like how like really break it down for me, how an airplane is built, the aerodynamics of it, I feel like everyone here probably isn't an engineer who can explain to you that how airplanes work, right? And yet we get on airplanes anyway without knowing these things. I think Deathcast is very similar, where you just kind of, you see the service that it provides, and even though you don't know how it's all put together, you understand its function. And I think that is very true for Matteo and Rufus, who understand what Deathcast offers. And as a result, they don't really expect to make it at the end.
Thank you so much. It was really nice to meet you.
You as well. Thank you for your question.
All right, we still have a bit more time for a couple more questions. Andrea, what's yours?
Hi, so I wanted to say that my first book from you was They Both Die in the End, and I can say that it was amazing. While I was reading the last pages, I was feeling a lot of things at the same time. So I didn't know what should I feel, sad, or I should expect that, because in the title there was right, They Both Die in the End. So my question is, what you felt when you wrote this book?
So it's funny, because as I said, I outlined it for about a year. I felt really invested in the characters. Then in the first draft, I was sobbing when writing the scene where Rufus is dragging Matteo's body out of the apartment and he's like cradling him in the hallway. I was sobbing. And it's that was my first time having an experience like that from writing the book. And also to this day, the only time that I I can remember that like visceral sob. It was like, I remember like I'd written, it was like middle of the night, Matteo had just died when I was writing the book. And then I ended up finishing the book within like 2 hours, and just telling Rufus's story to the end. And I was just crying. It was like 6 a.m, I think, when I finished the book. But yeah, it was, I had friends waking up to go to work and they were like, why are you awake? And I was just like, I finished my book. I've been like working all night. And, but yeah, I mean, I got really emotional. Like the way that I also described Matteo was that he's the last person that you want to see die because he's so good. And then he's dead. And then you see Rufus begging him to just not just wake up, but to like be alive again. And like that broke me. So, and I was like, and it's hard to make me cry. So I knew if that destroyed me, that none of you stood a chance. So yeah, that's how it felt for me.
When I finished this book, it was night too, so I was sobbing too at this time when I finished it.
Well,
thank you so much. It was a nice way to meet you.
You as well.
I don't think there was a dry eye on that scene. So I don't think anyone stood any sort of chance.
Yeah, we need to include tissues when we sell these books. Yeah.
I think they did. So when they first promoted, they both died at the end here in Romania. This is what the package contained, like literally a pack of tissue.
I remember seeing it now. I was like, I wanted to send me pictures. Yeah.
Yeah, that was great. Bianca, what about your question?
Hello, Adam. It's so nice to meet you. I hope you're hearing me fine. I'm currently reading History is All You Left Me, and I was wondering if you could describe the process of creating your characters. How do you come up with their quirks and flaws and all of that?
Yeah, so thank you for reading history. Yeah, so Griffin is very much me in a lot of ways. Like he has like my OCD, like which, you know, my compulsions have really like kind of like quieted down over the past few years to therapy, but the height of his like OCD, or the height of my OCD, is kind of represented with Griffin. And it's funny, I wasn't even intending on writing OCD into the book. Like I just had this, like, one of my compulsions was that I had to walk on people's left sides. And then Griffin just kind of starts narrating and he's saying like, yeah, I go to the left, and I was like, interesting. And then he also had my compulsion with like even numbers. And then, you know, so like, and that affects how I think, right? So if that affects how I think, that affects how Griffin thinks. So that all has to be built into the narrative where, you know, if he's giving an example about something, he's like random, like this is not in the book, but like if you were asking me my favorite color, I'm not going to just, maybe I'll be okay with like one, but like, I'm not going to just give you 3 examples. I'm going to give you 4 because that's even, you know? And like, so making sure that Griffin had like those patterns and stuff like that. But that was interesting as well because it's a non-linear story. So we have today and we have the past. So I had to kind of study who Griffin was back then, as well as who Griffin is today. And those changes, because who you are today is different than who you were 2 years ago. You know, it's different from who you were last month even, you know, depending on what has happened in your life. So you pay attention to those things, and some things you grow out of. Like Griffin thought that his compulsions were going to go away, right? They just got worse. So it was tracking things like that, which was, I don't know. I mean, it was really fun for me and just kind of like therapeutic, but yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm looking forward at your project.
Yeah, thank you, Bianca.
Right, Georgiana, how about your question?
Hi, Adam. I'm going to try to make this quick, but in your book, What If It's Us, with Becky, there's a scene where Arthur and Ben are in a train and they are a homophobic man tries to protect his son from them. And this scene had a huge impact on me and it made me cry a little. So yeah, I wanted to ask you, what impact did this scene have on you?
Well, so that's inspired by, I mean, I, having grown up in New York, like I definitely saw my fair share of like aggression. I was like the victim of something at one point. But specifically, I was with Becky and one of our best friends, David Arnold, who's also a brilliant author. And there was just this guy that was like coming for David. And then I was like standing right by David's side because like you mess with my friend, you mess with me. And I'm tall, so like that scares people. But this guy also was like in the army and that scared me. And so it was this really like tense situation though. And we just wanted to capture that feeling. And we just, because yes, What If It's Us is a rom-com, and there's a lot of like rosiness to it, and all the parents are really accepting of Arthur and Ben, but that doesn't mean the rest of the world is. And I never want to paint something or pretend that as queer people, we don't still have antagonizers out there who are going to challenge us just because of the way we love. So that was a really important scene to include in the novel. And also just for Arthur's development, like Arthur thinks that the world is just so bright and rosy. And then he discovers that, oh, New York has some harshness to it, you know, and there's something gritty and real about it. But yeah, like that, we hear a lot about that scene. So yeah, but I'm grateful to be able to talk about that today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Right, thank you, Georgiana. And I think that was the last question, right, that we were able to take, because unfortunately we have run out of time. But I think all of us here want to say how much we love you, and Larissa would also like to say that. So Larissa?
I wanted to say that I love your book so much, and I read only to It Ends With Us. But after this meeting, I would really love to read more books that you wrote. And I wanted to say that the idea of making an Instagram account for one of the characters was amazing. It was like everything that needed to be put in the book. It was very nice to have that Instagram account.
Thank you. Also, I didn't create that. That was a reader. Yeah, a reader did that, which I thought was really special. They had read the book before it came out, and they posted on the day that it happened. It was beautiful. Like, I mean, but yeah, that was not me. I don't run that account. I met the person who did when I was touring. But yeah, and I'm pretty smart when it comes to marketing. Not once did I think, let me create this account and do this. And for me, it's more special that like a reader went ahead and did it. But I love the Rufus on Pluto account. Like I check in on it every like few days. And it's really cool to see everyone commenting on it. But yeah, Larissa and everyone, thank you so much for all your great questions. This was such a great start to the day. And like, I'm about to like finish edits on the prequel today too. So like, this feels really like good timing and good energy to like bring into my work today. So thank you all.
Thank you so much, Adam. And thanks everyone for asking your questions. Obviously, we could have been here till tomorrow, I think, with questions.
Happily, yeah.
And that definitely shows us that you need to come here to Romania so that we can have this conversation in person.
Let's talk to Storia. Let's make it happen.
All right, guys. So remember that you can find Adam Silvera's books here in Romanian, right? So Storia Books has They Both Die at the End, Amândoi mor la sfârșit. If you haven't read it just yet, make sure that you do. And the prequel is coming our way later this year. So really looking forward to that. So once again, thank you everyone for logging in. And thank you so, so much. And hopefully we'll see you soon.
Yes, thank you for hosting. And again, thank you for translating, and thank you for getting ready to translate the prequel. I'm thankful to you. I'm sure we're all thankful to you for all the work and love that you put into it. Thank you, obviously, for the readers who've read the Romanian edition. They all love it just as much as the readers who've read it in English. So that is such a testament to your skill in adapting my work. So I'm so grateful that you did it so thoughtfully.
Thank you. All right, everyone, have a wonderful day, Adam, and have a wonderful evening for everyone else. And we'll see each other soon.